everyone, it's me, Darlene. I thought that since 3 months have passed since my mother was put into hospice care, and she's still around, I thought I would finally share the diagnosis that she got. It's not that it was a secret, it's just that, I don't know, at the time it just seemed like a very private thing, and it sounded horrible, but it didn't happen the way I was told. So I'm going to talk about it now, and I'm going to do it on this channel, my Growing Up Crazy channel, because I have a sneaking suspicion that my mother's narcissistic abilities came into play. I do, I really do. So back in October, toward the beginning of October, I think, and I might not be exactly right with these dates, and I know I've talked about dates and all these things, so, I just kind of have put that all behind me, the original dates for traveling to move and all that stuff. But I think it was I think it was October 9 that Derek and I were supposed to have a U-Haul and drive my shit to Mississippi. And then I think my mother was supposed to follow October 12. Those dates seem to make sense to me. She was supposed to travel by non-emergency medical transport from the nursing home in Sanford to the nursing home here in Mississippi. And she was all set up for that, everything. I think it was a Sunday. She was complaining about her leg hurt. She had cut herself with her fingernail, just like scratched herself. And since she has a lot of fluid in her legs, it almost really wants to burst. So they had a very hard time. That was in September. They had a hard time with that healing. And it got to the point that it looked like it was infected. So I was told. At the time, there was another COVID outbreak. So I hadn't seen my mother in about 2 weeks. I called the nurse and told her that I was concerned about the leg because one of the nurses said, yes, her leg feels warm. That's right. And I had to call somebody else to say, look, I want my mother to go to the emergency room. So they did. They took her. At the emergency room, my mother complained about stomach aches, stomach pains. And she had been complaining about that in the nursing home. And so they did tests, they did scans. Now this is all done in, she was brought to the emergency room in Sanford, Maine. I don't know where the tests were. I don't know if they brought her to the hospital in Biddeford or if I think she probably had the tests right there in Sanford. At some point she got transported to the hospital in Biddeford, Maine, and the next day, I get a phone call, which I was expecting because I knew that she wasn't going back to the nursing home that night. And the next day, I get a call, and the first call I get from anyone, she says, hi, this is so-and-so. She goes, and I'm with palliative care. And she said, do you know what that means? And I was like, I was just like thinking, wow, that infection in her leg must have been really bad. And I said, yes. And she said, well, we have your mom here and this and that. And she said she was complaining of a lot of stomach issues. So it wasn't the leg. I mean, the leg, had a slight infection, but that's not what they were concerned about. They did all kinds of scans because of the stomach issues. And they found a mass in her colon. And they said that she was bleeding out. Bleeding internally, bleeding out of her body, and that had been going on for a while, and that my mother's been given blood. She's not doing well with that, and she's just going to bleed out. And I thought, how horrible. That's awful. And the first thing I thought is, they're not going to let me take her home. I mean, do you take a person who's bleeding to death home? I was like, everything was just spinning. I'm like, and I told her, I said, we're supposed to be leaving in, less than 2 weeks. And I said, the only concern I have now is, I don't even know if I should cancel this or wait. I'm thinking I can bring my mother home. She can die if they let me take her home. and then I'll still go on this trip. I know that's what I should do because there would be no reason to stay home, and then I thought, but then what if she doesn't die and I cancel everything? I just didn't know. I was just, I wasn't concerned about my plans. I was just concerned with, I want to make sure that these people know what they're talking about because it is going to change a lot of things. And if my mother wasn't going to die, I wanted to still take her to Mississippi. But now I don't know if that transport thing is a good idea, if she's a hospice patient. I told her, I said, can I take her home to die here in her home? And she said, yes, we can arrange for that. Now, she told me that my mother had 2 to 3 days, a week at most. She said it's going to be very quick because she's bleeding out. And oh my God, I couldn't even fathom what I was going to be going through with her. To me, it just sounded awful, just awful. So because my mother is 98, she said, we're not going to do anything to see about that mass. But she says with the bleeding and with the looks of that mass, it's colon cancer. And I thought, okay. And she said at her age, it just wouldn't make any sense to do any kind of colonoscopy or biopsy or, anything to look into that. And she said she certainly wouldn't survive or, want to be put through surgery if there's any surgery that could be done. And I agree with that. I don't want my mother going through a whole bunch of surgery. But I would have liked a definite on that mass. I don't know if that was a Monday. Like I said, I can't really remember. But then I think they set it up in that same day. I told her, I said, I can come and see her this afternoon. And she said, that's fine. And she said, I will look into the arrangements for hospice and we'll get back to you. And I think it was that very same day that she got back to me. And by the time I went to see my mother that afternoon, I already knew that my mother would be coming home the next day. That much I know because I remember saying to her, you're coming home tomorrow. Now, she had been in a nursing home for 6.5 months. So she just couldn't believe she was coming home. And I spoke to, I don't know, maybe a social worker there or whatever. And they were saying to my mother, do you understand what this means when you're going home? You're going to be in hospice care and it's, for the end of life and this and that. And my mother was good with all that. So I ended up going home and the next day she was transported by ambulance to the house. And again, I didn't ask them anything like, what do I do to, what do I do? And then the other thing is, I can't believe that she's been bleeding out for a while and that the nursing home hasn't said anything about this. I mean, so I had so many things in my mind. So my mother comes home. She looked pretty frazzled, pretty weak, but she had been in a hospital and, having a lot of tests done. And she doesn't do well in those type of environments. And she just looked like shit. She really did. And I was convinced this is near end of life. I certainly made the right decision by having her brought here, and not having her return to the nursing home. I did not want her going to a nursing home. I couldn't even be there because of COVID, so there was no question in my mind she was coming home with me. I didn't care what it did to the trip, to the move. I keep calling it a trip because I feel like it's just a temporary thing, but it's not. I just cared about what is the best way for me to handle all of this. And of course, I'm on the phone with Derek, and he's like, well, why don't you wait a few days because we had some time. He's like, before you cancel everything, and so we agreed on that made sense. And so my mother is home, and I had decided I was going to stay on the couch next to her in that room that I had built for her in her addition. So I would be right there for her during the night. That first night, I thought, yes, this is very close to the end of life because she was extremely fidgety. And I remember my father being like that. And she was constantly putting the bed up and down, and then just saying weird things and all kinds of things. And every time I would doze off and I'd wake up, I would check to see, is she breathing? It's like, and she made it through that night. And the next day, whenever I would change her, I was like, where's the blood they're talking about? I mean, she's supposed to be bleeding out. And I never saw any evidence of that. And I was like, I was dumbfounded. I just didn't understand. And I never bothered to call them because you have to remember that I have been going through hell with the whole move and the decluttering and all the people I was dealing with. It just, this on top of it, the last thing I wanted to do is now call the hospital and say, what blood? So I just dropped it. Hospice is all set up and stuff, and her vitals were okay. And, because they all come that, not all, but they all come that first week. But I had hospice there right away. The day she arrived, hospice was there sitting with me, waiting for her, the people to admit her. The next day she had her nurse come in and somebody else come in. So I wasn't alone at the very beginning. And then the second night, she was like just out of it. And now I thought, now she's sleeping way too hard, so this is very near the end. I thought there's a chance she's just going to die in her sleep. But the next day comes and, there's no evidence of blood. And she's starting to be like herself again. And I was like, okay, this is interesting. So I hurried up and started talking to hospice about this because I still needed to move. I had an apartment already rented. And now I need to juggle when's a good time to move my mother. Do we do it now before she dies? Because I'm already thinking she could last a while, and I did not want to be in Maine for winter. And hospice was right on board with that. They're like, she is stable. They said, how about we give it 1 week? And I said, I agree. 1 week, if she's still stable, then I will make arrangements to move her. So at that point now, I canceled all our plans because I knew that we were going to be waiting a week. And I started arranging plans for a couple weeks out. And it's almost unbelievable that not only was I dealing with a move, but I was dealing with my mother, who I was told was going to die in just a couple days, a week at the most. And I was like, how could they have been so convinced? And then I thought, I bet my mother was acting like she was dying. I have to believe that my mother has a mass. I can't imagine that they would misdiagnose that. But I'm not convinced that mass had anything to do with any kind of bleeding. It certainly isn't bleeding now, never has with me at all. And I don't know. Can they possibly have gotten that wrong? They said they gave her blood twice. I don't know. And again, I've never called to answer these questions. But then I was thinking, if there was evidence of blood, and even though there's a mass, my mother was probably playing her death trip. I have a video on this channel that I recorded a while back when I first started this channel, so like 5 years ago-ish. And it explains how my mother was having a heart attack when she was in the nursing home for rehab. I think it might have been the time that she had cellulitis. She had them convinced that she was having a heart attack, and I went to the emergency room to meet the ambulance, and when I saw my mother, I knew she wasn't having a heart attack. And I remember, I don't know if I mentioned that in that video, but I was upset with the nursing home because I had told them what they could expect from her, and I was upset that they fell for it. And I remember them saying, you didn't see her, she was in distress. And I said, was it like this? I mean, seriously, my mother overdoes it. They're like, yes, she was in serious distress. I said, no, that's what I grew up with. And I was mad, I was yelling. at that desk at the nursing home because I was so frustrated with all of it. But anyway, so I'm thinking that maybe in the hospital, my mother was playing that. I've seen my mother like near death many times. I mean, I can't even list how many times. All through my growing up as an adult, I can still, just, see the ambulances coming and taking care of her. And, because I was always like, this is the time. This time it's for real. And I don't do that anymore. Especially at her age. If she's in distress, just lay in your bed, Mom, and you can die right here. I mean, I'm so over it. But I had, other people see my mother and say, you have to do something. She will have convulsions and look like she's, having seizures, and she will say she's having a stroke, and she'll make her face crooked, and she'll stay that way for a while. And I had an uncle who saw her in distress in her bed, and he was mad at me because I was not calling an ambulance. And I kept saying to him, if you just leave, this will stop. She knows you're watching her. She's putting it on. She wants sympathy. She's got an audience. Please just leave. And he left, but he was mad, and he called his daughter, my cousin, and said, you get over there. And by the time my cousin came, my mother was at her sink doing dishes. It was completely fake. But people don't believe that when I say it, because they see it and they think, who would fake shit like this? Anyway, so she probably was faking stuff in the hospital that made them think, okay, a mass, she's bleeding, and she really looks like she's dying. She's sick. This woman is near the end of her life, and that was 3 months ago. And my mother has a lot of energy. Not like to walk and run, but her brain is in full force, and so is her mouth. So I just wanted to fill you in on that. Now, she's hospice. And I know everybody thinks there's a 6-month limit to hospice. That is not the case. You are generally put into hospice if there's at least, about 6 months. They don't want to say, you've got 10 years to live. We're going to put you in hospice. From what they were saying at the hospital, my mother certainly wasn't supposed to have 6 months. But once you're in hospice, my mother is in a constant decline because of her age. They're not likely to take her out of hospice unless we would want her out of hospice. Like if my mother would insist that she wants to start seeing a doctor again and she wants to get on different meds, and they don't do that. They're there to ease your way into death. They're not there to have you have biopsies to see if you really have colon cancer. So, but I don't think my mother wants to go that route. I certainly don't want her to, because I have no interest in taking my mother to doctors and things like that. So, but they did say if she would be out of hospice, I would have plenty of notice. And since there is a very long waiting list for this Medicaid waiver that I can get for her to be able to get help in the home with AIDS and stuff, there's a long waiting list for that. But at least this hospice has said, let's get her on the list. The other hospice I was with when we first got to Mississippi, she wouldn't even help me with getting my mother on any kind of waiting list. So I was like, I don't care how long there is for a waiting list, because my mother could live to 103. Who knows? And I want as much help as I can get. Again, number one reason I don't send her to a nursing home is that it's stressful for me. I have to go out to visit her. I have to talk on the phone to her often. She complains. The nurses complain to me. At least that's the experience I had at the nursing home she was in. And it's just, she will not get the kind of care that she wants or needs. She gets mad at me if I don't make her like exactly what she wants to eat. We don't have tomatoes, and to her that's a reason to say that I can't take care of her, I don't do anything for her, she doesn't get me what I want. she can get really mad about stuff like that. She has seriously told the aides and the nurse that I'm starving her. Do any of you watch my TikToks? Even one meal that I show you, that is not starvation. That's good for an entire day. For a lot of people, you know what I mean? Every meal is like, I mean, I do say to her, Ma, I am not a restaurant. You cannot order specific things. I'm not going to the store to get you exactly that. You know, and if I say that, she can get really, really upset. And just about all kinds of things. She's a pain in the ass. And I know that doesn't sound like much. And I know everybody would like to say, but she's old and she, you know, she just... This has nothing to do with her age. It's how she is. And because I grew up with it, I see all those little things as something is brewing. When she starts to leave something on her plate on purpose and act like she was insulted that I would give her something, it could be like a couple slices of banana, something that she eats all the time. And then all of a sudden, it's like poo-poo to that. I can tell she's pissed off about something. She wants to start hurting me, and she'll know that if she does these little sneaky things like, I don't like bananas, she knows that there's a good chance I'm going to say, what are you talking about? And then now there's a fight. Now she has the right to just lay in on me. So it's always on eggshells around here. And she's like that at a nursing home. And, you know, and then she calls me to complain. And then the nurses call me to say, what is going on with her? And then they want to just medicate her. And I probably shouldn't care. I should probably just send her away and have no contact and say, bye. But I can't do that. I can't. I have too much empathy for people. And, you know, I wouldn't do that to a dog. I wouldn't want, you know, I want somebody to have a decent life, even though they're, you know, narcissistic. All right, I just thought I'd fill you guys in. And I know it's, you know, it's a touchy subject because I'm talking about an old person who has problems. I mean, you know, she probably has colon cancer. I don't know. Maybe she was bleeding. I don't know. You know, we know that she's old. She's having a hard time. She can't walk. I mean, she can take a few steps and she can't be on her feet for long. You know, she can't crochet because of her hands. I'm lucky she can color. This has nothing to do with what I went through my entire life. So my entire life is still valid with the way she acts. It brings it up all the time. That hasn't changed. So when I talk about that, I'm talking about stuff that has been lifelong. There are other new things that come into play because of her age. I'm good with all that. I'm not... you know, some kind of a monster. I understand that she's getting old, and I do understand that one of these times she won't be crying wolf. It will be the real thing, but I don't think it will be filled with drama and theatrical moves. And, you know, when she's doing those kind of things, and she does that in front of the aides and her nurse, and already they can start to know, because I say, oh, you might think I should be concerned about this, but I'm not, because this doesn't have anything to do with end of life. This is how she lived her life, and she's still living it. So, you know, now when she's really showing that she's like, I mean, seriously, she does like very scary things, and I'm like, she's fine. And now they're starting to believe me. It's just weird. All right, you guys. Thank you so much for watching. I do feel like people think that I'm throwing her under the bus, but I'm not. It's my life. It's how I grew up, and it's reality, and it's not just me that is going through this. Many, many people. I follow some awesome people on TikTok who it almost comforts me because they had it even worse. You know what I mean? It's terrible, but you know, it can be really bad. Living with a narcissist, it's not so much a narcissist, but somebody with narcissistic personality disorder. There is a difference, and it's just quite the experience. I don't wish it on anyone. All right, thank you so much for watching. I'll be back with more soon. Bye.